I'm Dana Gentry, your Communications Director at SEIU. Today we're talking with Assemblywoman Dina Neal. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
You've been doing this a while now. What do you think the next session of the legislature is going to look like for labor? The last session was a really tough one.
I think it's going to be a lot of reclaiming old legislation. Clearly we had collective bargaining on the table. We had, what is it?
SB 241.
Yeah, we had SB 241. We also had the school bill, which eliminated the prevailing wage.
Right.
We had longevity pay. But one of the good things, though, they did get the COLA increase. It was a small amount for state employees, but I think all those issues are going to come back up to try to restore or try to make sure that certain things go back to the way they were.
What are you hearing from your voters in your district when you're out walking? What are their concerns this year?
Energy. There's actually the minimum wage issue is making its way through, and education. They're worried about the schools, and because there were a lot of bills that moved that would change the dynamic of the structure of the school system.
So is there opposition to vouchers, support?
I think there's mixed support, right? I mean, most parents want a good school, so there's support for the vouchers, but there's not support for breaking up the school district to have the haves and the have-nots. And so they're really just hoping that, there is change, but not change that's detrimental to their children.
And on the energy issues, is it net metering? Are you hearing?
It's net metering. It's the NV Energy is a monopoly. We need to have solar. And I think clearly, there needs to be a balance between the two, right? Because we created the solar energy. It was subsidized through NV Energy because they needed to meet their portfolio standard. But I think ultimately, that's going to be a huge portion.
Are you concerned this whole event with the solar, that the net metering, the solar companies is going to hurt our efforts to lure new businesses, especially renewable energy companies, to Nevada?
I'm not sure about that. I think, there's, I'm not sure about that. I think some of that is, politics, right? I think that if we need to fix the legislation, right? We need to make sure it's fair and make sure it's balanced. But I think that people are hoping that it's going to be adjusted in 2017. So I just don't see that as an issue of someone not coming, because I think pretty much everyone knows there is going to be a fix to that legislation.
So you think it would be more about the mechanism of the PUC being involved rather than the legislature?
Right. I mean, ultimately, the legislation pushed it to the PUC, right? It didn't keep it at the legislature.
Right.
So now it's the legislature taking it back to then fix the issue.
On your website, you mentioned predatory lending and people losing their homes to foreclosure. Is that still a big issue among your constituents?
It is. I think what's happening now is there are a lot of investors who own property, and they are turning over the property. So I think what it shifted to now is more of a investor-owned property where we have created more renters than home buyers. And I think that the predatory lending itself is not as pervasive as it used to be. I think more so people were losing their houses through HOA liens, and different factors were affecting them. I mean, I still have certain neighborhoods that still have empty homes, and it's interesting that a home would still be empty 5 years later. But I also think that it's because potentially how they lost their home, right? If you lost your home you had a short sale, let's say you had a short sale and then you're trying to sell it to someone else. I mean, there are some different things that are at play there.
What about on the minimum wage? What are you hearing from small business owners who say they can't handle it?
Yeah, there's mixed reviews with that. And I have a mixed opinion. I support raising minimum wage. Now, do I believe that there's something to having entry-level positions where you earn and you make your way up? But I think that we need to have also a living wage discussion. I'm not sure it's $15 an hour, right? I mean, I think that there is an increase, but what that looks like has to be, I think we need to start thinking about what does Nevada's landscape look like, right? Are we really just trying to have entry-level work? Or are we trying to actually have people go through the education system. Supposedly, we're trying to build this pipeline, right, between the workforce and education. So that means that you have more skills, more capabilities to earn more, right? And then we're also tying in our higher education to economic development, which means that we want more businesses and industry to come here to have more jobs, to have more variety versus service-based industry. So I think the issue is complicated, but I also think that we need to be honest about what is the landscape and what have we perpetuated in Nevada.
But it sounds like you have real concerns about it dissuading hiring, at least among entry-level workers.
I want entry-level workers to have a living wage to pay their bills. I think that's super important. I see more often than not people making $8 or $9 an hour and they have an apartment and they have childcare. And one thing that I found out though recently, and I wasn't aware of this, that the way our childcare subsidy was set up in the state, it was based on 20 years ago. And they just changed it federally where now it matches the current cost of childcare. Before it was like based on 1980s. And so I just thought, I thought that was interesting, right? So if you were working and you wanted childcare and you did use the subsidy program that we had here, it only covered maybe 20% of what you needed. And so I think that there are a lot of things at play that are hurting our working families and trying to make sure that the wage that they do get takes care of their family.
All right, Assemblywoman, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks.